Now, the issue of what to do with our elderly people, I mean, the answer is obvious. We need to kill them as quickly as possible. But that issue has been getting some headlines over the last couple of days because of an article that we'll talk about in a second, written by Matthew Paris. But I just wanted to start off with this from the BBC this morning. China's aging population, a demographic crisis is unfolding for Xi Jinping. And of course, the narrative here is that there are so many old people in China that they're going to have a major problem with what to do with them. At the same time, we're getting headlines like this: population tipping point could arrive by 2030. And what this article from Science is saying is that they're highlighting a study which is showing that global fertility levels have reached such that we cannot replace our populations. And so population is going to fall globally over the next period of time. Now, this, of course, is increasingly a problem for the UK as well, with an ageing population, people being discouraged from having children. The cost of having children is beyond what most people can bear. And the government is not providing any support. So, of course, we're going to be dealing with the issue of what to do with our elderly in the not too distant future. So, not to miss an opportunity, Matthew Paris decided to publish this article in the Times a few days ago. We can't afford a taboo on assisted dying. So let's have a look and see what he was saying. He said, "I can't dispute the objectors' belief that once assisted dying becomes normalised, we'll become more apt to ask yourselves how much longer we can justify the struggle." That's the struggle for life. So in other words, do we really want to continue to be a burden on the young and so on? We're really useless eaters. We don't really contribute anything to society. So maybe it's just best to pop off. He goes on, if we just put that. So is life still giving us more pleasure than pain? How much is all this costing relatives in the health service? How much of a burden are we placing on those who love us? How much of a burden are we placing on ourselves? He said, if assisted dying becomes common and widely accepted, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions, will consider choosing this road when the time comes, and in some cases ask themselves whether it would be selfish not to. And he went on, within a decade or more, assisted suicide will be seen as a normal road for many to take, to be considered socially responsible, and even finally urged upon people. So this is the narrative that Matthew Paris is pushing. But this isn't the first time he's pushed this narrative in the Spectator. This is published on the 31st of March 2024, but actually this is a republication of an article he published some time ago, a number of years ago. Euthanasia is coming, like it or not. If the law does not lead, it will follow. The root reason is Darwinian. So he's implying survival of the fittest is the issue here. So at root, the reason for assisted dying is Darwinian, he said. Tribes that handicap themselves will not prosper. As medical science advances, the cost of prolonging human life way past usefulness will impose an ever heavier burden on the community for an ever longer proportion of its members' lives. And in this article, he went on to say, we may not be aware that our moral attitudes are being driven by the Darwinian struggle for survival, but in part they will be. I don't need to shout from the rooftops that suicide can be a fine and noble thing, or rail against the ever-growing cost of medical care in the final prolonged phase of people's lives. My opinions and my voice are incidental. This is a social impulse which will grow, nourished by forces larger than all of us. Now, of course, there's quite a lot going on in the world which is pushing us in the direction of supporting assisted suicide for the elderly, not least the immigration narrative. But I just wanted to briefly look at where this type of thinking comes from. And I'm going to bring H.G. Wells on screen at this point, because he, of course, known as writing War of the Worlds and many other science fiction books, but he's also a eugenicist and a globalist of the one world government type. So he wrote that the method must come in cases still, the method that must in some cases still be called in is death, the merciful obliteration of weak and silly and pointless things. He said, future humans will naturally regard the modest suicide of the incurably melancholy or diseased or helpless persons as a high and courageous act of duty rather than a crime. And it just strikes me that the type of thinking that Matthew Paris is expressing in his articles is very similar to the type of thinking that Wells expressed at the time. Now, Wells was part of a cabal, including the likes of Bertrand Russell and Julian Huxley, and people like this who were very much involved in creating the United Nations, for example. But if we just look at one particular book by Wells here, The Open Conspiracy, and look at the types of things that he was talking in that book. So he was calling for the end of the nation state forever, to control human population, to eliminate the idea that man is created in the image of God. And I'd completely forgotten this bit, but he was calling for he was making the point that Russia is a crucial target for incorporation into the European system. And it's just incredible when we look back at, or when we look at where the types of policies that we're seeing coming out at the moment, where did they originate? And they originate here in this country. So Vanessa, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, but the whole issue of assisted dying is a horrendous narrative that's being built.
Yeah, well, if you remember, I covered it fairly extensively for UK column regarding what was coming through in Canada. But it seems now that Canada is actually backpedaling, and the UK is picking up the baton to go forward with the policy. But it's just, I don't really have any words to describe it. It's very, very dark and sinister.
Yes. Now, Alexander in the chat box is saying, and Fabian George Bernard Shaw, absolutely part and parcel of this. We shouldn't forget that H.G. Wells was a founder of the Fabian Society. So the Fabian type of thinking is expressed in everything that he did. But anyway, let's move on. If you like what the UK Column does, you'd like to support us, all the options are on support.ukcolumn.org. We can't do what we do without your help. So if you can possibly help us financially, that would be really appreciated. You can pick something up at the UK Column shop, but please do share anything you find on the various platforms, especially ukcolumn.org and ukcolumnextracts.co.uk. Now, yesterday at 1 o'clock, we had an interview with Hilary Baltrop on her mother, Lois, who was killed in the NHS system. And she was asking, could she have done more? She and her mother were UK Column members. If you haven't seen that, please do have a look at it. It's on the website, and share it as widely as possible. And Charles, tomorrow you are speaking to Sir Julian Rose.
That's right. Julian Rose will be a familiar name to UK Column audiences. And he spoke about his introduction to organic farming back in the 1970s, how there was no market for it, but still he made it work through the proximity principle, essentially growing food on a small scale to satisfy a local market. And then he talks me through how corrupted that system has become up until the present day, sort of leading off into things such as transhumanism and the rest of it. So it's a very interesting insight into a long, long career in organic farming at the business end of it.
So that's at 1 p.m. tomorrow, ukcolumn.org/live and the usual places. A reminder of the Stand in the Light festival taking place in May. In Cumbria. The details on screen at the moment and will be in the show notes. And also for Sounds Beautiful Festival taking place in Dorset on June the 27th to the 30th. We will, either all or some of us will be at both of those events. So do join us, come along to those if you possibly can. Now, let's move on to NATO.